I'd like to say I love you, and within that, there is just that God loves you. And there's something in everyone that is this really cool thing.
Welcome, everybody, to the Jeff Mara podcast. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify or some other audio podcast, I just want to let you know that this podcast is also on YouTube, and you can go check it out there as well. It is called Jeff Mara Podcast. Today, we have an awesome guest. His name is Dr. Lawrence Brock. Dr. Brock holds a Doctor of Spiritual Science and holds a postgraduate degree in Advanced Ministerial Counseling. He is also a regular visiting professor at the University of Bridgeport. Dr. Brock is a near-death experience survivor, counselor, healer, and clairvoyant. Dr. Brock, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I want to get right into it. My audience is really into near-death experiences. So can we start on the day of your near-death experience and go from there?
Yes. So I had been living in Longmont, Colorado that day at that time. And I was driving back in the United States, driving back to Westchester, New York, to visit with my parents. And so I drove, a lot of miles that day. It took more than one day to drive back. It's about 2,000 miles. And when I got home, I found out a high school friend of mine was having a party. And I wanted to go to the party. Actually, my roommate in Colorado was also a high school friend of mine. We lived out there together. And so we came back to visit our folks, and I went to the party. We went in separate cars. I was drinking and doing some drugs also. And I was a little high, not what I considered too high to drive, but I asked for a ride home from my friend. A big part of my motivation was the young lady who was having the party I thought was pretty, and I could go back the next day and talk to her. When I was almost home, I remembered that my sister, who was staying at my parents' house at the time, also needed the car in the morning for work. So I asked my friend to drive me back, and he protested, but I assured him I was just overacting, being high. The truth is, I thought I was, but I really wasn't, because I do remember leaving the party after he drove me back. And then the next thing I remember is I was out of my body in the white light, looking down. My body was leaning against a tree, and there was a police officer sort of not kneeling, crouching over me. I assume he pulled me out of the car, and the car was there, squished beyond what it looked like I could survive. And my head was, I always get mixed up which side the scar's on, but you can still see it. It goes all the way back. My head was, cut open.
Wow.
I was in the white light. It felt like a short experience, but it just felt like I was in this incredibly loving light. Even though I saw my body smashed up, it seemed perfectly fine. Like everything was fine. Everything seemed fine beyond what usually I experience when I'm alive physically. But it felt like a lot of love, a lot of understanding and wisdom, and just like connected to the universe. And even though it's years ago, I'm still trying to find the way to describe it, because it was just so like just knowing everything, but really at the same time, not really knowing anything. It wasn't in words. It was just more of a feeling. I didn't look this way, but it seemed, what I knew was there was this giant white light being and a smaller being. And the smaller being said to me, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." After that, in some ways, the biggest thing that happened to me was I started meeting a lot of people that had near-death experiences that were spiritual teachers and healing teachers. So the words of how I describe what happened really came to me later when some of these teachers were talking to me. One in particular, who was a Sufi sheikh, he started talking about the ocean of divine love and benevolence. And I go, oh, that's what the white light all around me. When he started talking to me about God, I really wasn't a very spiritual or religious person at that time. I go, wow, that was the big white light behind me. When he started talking about Jesus, I go, that was, just the feeling that came to me when he spoke those words were the same as the feeling then. So after that happened, the voice said, go back into your body, go back. Your father wants you to stay. So I went back and woke up in the hospital 3 days later with a new mission in life, which was to find out about all that stuff.
Oh, that's very interesting. When you were there, and I can understand that it's probably indescribable for most people because it's almost like beyond our senses. When you're in the light, before you saw the being, do you hear anything, or is it silence?
It was silent, but it didn't sound like silent that seems abnormally silent. It just, I didn't really hear any. I mean, everything just seemed so okay. And sometimes people say, did you want to come back? I didn't even think of that. It just seemed like everything was the way it was supposed to be. And I don't remember hearing anything in the way you're saying. I just heard that voice. That was it.
And when you're in the light, I mean, it may be undescribable, but we'll do the best we can. It's not a light in front of you shining on you. It's like you're inside, you're just in light, maybe like you're surrounded by light, right?
Yes. It was sort of like being in a cloud, if you could imagine that. I mean, It was just, there was a nice soft feeling to it. It wasn't a very extremely bright light either. It was kind of soft white. And I'm a very kinesthetic person. So even my experience a lot when I'm physically alive is a lot about how things feel emotionally and touching with my hands. So my thoughts about it are is that basically God communicates to us in our own language. And my language is definitely feeling as opposed to words usually. I've learned a lot from being educated, a lot because most people want you to speak words, that to learn how to speak, but a lot of it is how do I put my feelings into words? So during that, it was like a direct transmission through my feelings.
When you saw the two beings of light, which from what you're saying appears to be a larger one that was God and a smaller one that was Jesus, right?
Yes.
I'm not making fun of you. I'm just trying to
No, I'm laughing because it's such a joyful thing. It's and it is hard to put the words on it, and it is almost like guessing. And then when I say it, it's like, yeah, that's what it was.
Well, then that's awesome because
my feelings are just so important to me.
It may be just an example right now. What just happened was some pure joy, reliving the experience came out.
Yeah. As soon as I think of it, it connects into this amazing energy. And part of my gift from doing that is I can help other people connect into that, which is another great joy of my life.
That's awesome. When you see them, is it like a silhouette of a person in a light? And is it human body shaped or just kind of like a light?
In my near-death experience, they were actually behind me. I do have an image, but it was like they were behind me, but I sort of knew what they looked like. The big white light was just a big white light. There was no form to it. The small one, it looked like a different shade of white, really, that could have been a person, but I didn't see any features or anything like that. It was sort of just like a light being.
Would you say that when you were in the white light that you could have had like 360 degrees of perception? We're not really looking forward anymore. We had this 360.
Yes, through my feelings, yes. Mm-hmm. It was like I said, it was almost like I didn't have any questions in my mind about anything. Mm-hmm. Everything just seemed right and proper. And it is sort of like I knew everything. I seemed to understand my accident was okay. Mm-hmm. Even, any family dilemmas, it just seemed the whole world, just everything made sense in a way. And again, it's hard to put into words, but sometimes things just seem right and proper. It's sort of like on a beautiful summer day or whatever season you like, and it's just beautiful out and you feel good.
Yeah.
That's real. And then multiply that times, 1 million or whatever. So
right.
It's like,
it's like everything is just perfect.
Well, even it was more like everything was okay because it was very gentle. In a certain way, perfect is like there has to be something a certain way. And this was like, no, everything is fine the way it is, really. I guess perfect. I'm always trying to find the right words for this.
No, I think that was a good distinction. I didn't think about it that way. Did you have any other communication besides you need to go back, your father wants you to come back?
Not that I was aware of on that level, but like I said, as soon as I came to, I knew I had to find out. Like it was almost like not knowing was the carrot, and I had to find out. And I traveled. I just met a lot of really cool people and really amazing people.
At that time, were you already in counseling, being a counselor, or is that something that you took on after this experience?
I was not. I had done some therapy as a patient, in my youth a little bit. No, I was a math and science kind of person, not thinking about this kind of stuff at all. Mm-hmm. I was some interested in psychology, but no, I was in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. I started my healing practice in my mid 30s. Mm-hmm. And that started with hands-on stuff as opposed to counseling. So, after the near-death experience, I noticed in my touch, my hands became very warm. I was very sensitive to people's energy. Mm-hmm. I did notice my intuition increase, but at the time, I didn't even really, it's not like I put two and two together because it wasn't something people talked about. Like now, people, even TV shows, they have so much fictional TV shows. It's just, it wasn't like, oh, this thing happened and I knew what it was. It was almost like, what's going on here? And I wanted to find out about it. Really, my interest was more spiritual as opposed to finding out about healing.
Did you notice any other physical changes within your own body, like your change in your sensation of touch?
No, I don't think so. I had injuries to my body and stuff. That was a change, but it was really that I was very sensitive to what's going on in people's bodies and very kinesthetic. As I said, that's always been my primary sensory input. So, but the only reference I had was in Star Trek, to tell you the truth. So even though, and that was fictional, and I wouldn't possibly think that was real, but some of that was happening to me. And so it was like trying to figure out, what is this? Like, what does this mean? Mm-hmm. And I also was kind of intuitive before that. And when I was young, and I really assumed everyone was. Mm-hmm. So I've also been kind of naive. And so I learned to explore it. And, then I found people that sort of validated my experience and told me what was going on, which is good.
Well, it's great to meet another Trekkie here. I think you're my first.
I recently watched all the Star Trek series, and it's like there's so much cool spiritual and healing stuff in there that I didn't even notice back in those days.
When you're speaking of it, we'll just I could do a whole podcast just on Star Trek alone, but
definitely.
But as we just kind of there, would you feel like when you're talking about the spiritual aspect, are you talking more like around the Next Generation or the original series?
I noticed it in everyone. In Next Generation, there's a lot of stuff, but even in Deep Space Nine, Deep Space Nine, there's very mystical stuff. I watched even in the original Star Trek. It's very cool. It really, in a lot of ways, what people see on TV really opens them up. And even, the vampire shows that are on now, there's a metaphysical part. So kids you talk about this stuff. Oh yeah, of course. It's like no big deal to them. It's kind of cool.
It's funny, before I'll leave this subject, my kids play video games a lot, and, and in the game, your character or your player or whatever dies and respawns, and that's kind of that word spawn really became, and respawn is really a popular word now with video gamers. And so I'm wondering now, even just kids game so much that now it's almost like teaching them reincarnation or something, because they're always respawning.
It is like that. Someone said to me not too long ago, do you wonder if the people that were writing Star Trek had near-death experiences, because some of it just seems so like the story.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that Stephen King book, The Dark Zone, The Dead Zone,
Dead Zone.
and
Is that a movie as well?
There was a movie made of it, but it was a movie and a TV show. The TV show, a lot of the things in that were very similar to my experience.
Oh, wow.
I found it the closest fictional thing that, I mean, he was unconscious for 3 months or 3 years or something. I was unconscious for 3 days, but when he came to, he just started knowing things about people. Just the way he didn't go in his mind like he knew what it was like this discovery process. And I think that's important in doing spiritual work, to understand you are always discovering. There's always more.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's, let's say my normal mind is reluctant to believe in some of these things. And then it's like, how much can I open up? And the more I do, the more I can help people. And it seemed like that was his process also, that seemed very true to reality to me. It's good.
So as you mentioned before about it almost seemed wanting to know about your experience became like a carrot for you.
Yeah.
And you weren't particularly religious at all before this. You wouldn't even say you were a Christian or anything else, right?
I was born Jewish and I just assumed I was Jewish, but my beliefs now are definitely more Christian, and I go to church, a Unity church actually. And
oh, wow. That's very interesting.
But I've studied Hinduism, since then I've studied different religions. So the latest thing I've been doing, instead of saying I'm no religion, I'm saying I'm all religions, because I do, in my beliefs, there are things from each different religions. And it's, a lot of people have issues with religion, partially because what people use it for. There's so many wars fought over religion. You go to school, they're telling you you're going to go to hell or whatever. That's not the part of the religions I'm talking about. I'm talking about the loving part. Even, the story of Jesus was he left his body and he came back, and he healed people. And, in all the religions, there's those stories that the more conservative type of religious people don't want to acknowledge that part of it, but that's the part that really touches me.
Yeah, makes a lot. I'm kind of
so now I consider myself Christian, and I was Jewish just because that's what I was born back then. But
it's very fascinating that you say that, because from what I've read or heard before, like someone who's Muslim will see Muhammad, someone who may be Buddhist will see Buddha. I'm not really sure what I don't think there's a prophet yet for Judaism. They're waiting for the prophet. Is that correct?
Well, Abraham would be the one that's.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, you didn't see.
I've never heard of anyone seeing him in a near-death experience, but yeah. All of those saints and stuff are around in the spirit and can help heal people, depending on what they're open to. A lot of times it is the religion the person's born into, that saint helps them quite a lot, actually. Not always, but like if I don't know intuitively, that's where, well, I always check with Jesus because he covers the most people on the earth. And then if it's not that, then I'll ask the person what they were born and check within that. And otherwise ask them what their heart tells them.
Do you feel like even now you can somehow access that? I don't know how to describe it, but access that experience, that energy, that place. Are you able to access that at will, or does it sometimes just kind of come and go in dreams or anything like that?
All of those things. Sometimes I can do it at will. When I'm working, I can do it like almost like that, and it sort of happens naturally. In my life, I meditate a lot every day. I do journal writing. I do Tai Chi. I do things. So sometimes it takes a long time of meditating to do it. Sometimes I'll just start to talk to someone and it's not even work, and all of a sudden it happens. So it's some that it happens on its own, some that I have to initiate it. Luckily, I've sort of discovered to not have it on all the time, when I'm socializing and stuff, and just because part of it is I became very sensitive to people's energy, and people start to release things. And some, when I'm sitting working, like it's, I can be in a certain space where I tend to take on less of it. When I'm around a lot of people, that becomes a little trickier.
After your experience, it appears that you went on like a spiritual quest. And to me, I think that could be very interesting.
I'm still on that spiritual quest.
You met this Sufi sheikh, which I believe is kind of like a spiritual Muslim guy. But did you travel? Like, did you travel to India and Tibet and, different places trying to learn new things?
I traveled, but only within the United States for that.
Well, it's still a big country, a lot of places to see.
It is, and I've met some amazing people. I had a kind of an interesting thing happen. So I learned to do polarity therapy, which is a very gentle type of body work. And I was learning this from this woman, and at some point she said she was having a booth in a health fair in Manhattan, and she wanted me to come be there because she didn't want to have to stand at the booth for 3 days in a row. Okay. So I had this inside of me. My intuition said, I'm going to go try 2 things. So this is a big thing in Manhattan where there's more than 100 booths, and it could be overwhelming, but I trusted my intuition and I tried 2 things. There was one person right around the corner from our booth, and I had a great experience with him. It ends up he lived like 2 miles from me, and I learned a lot of healing from him. So I studied with him for a couple of years after that. The main thing he taught was very deep body work, but he also taught me a lot of spiritual meditations. He's the first one I learned Tai Chi from also.
Was he doing, like body work? When you say deep, it makes me think of Rolfing.
Something just like that, yeah. I think it was called postural integration is what his work was, but it's basically... So when I took a course from him for that, it was like a 9-month course. We used Ida Rolf's book about the body work. There was a few of the strokes were a little different. Part of what he did also incorporated some concepts from acupuncture. So there was the energetic aspect to it also.
Very interesting.
But it was just that I met him there, and he was right around the corner in New York City, and then lived really close to me. Just a lot of, coincidences happened like that in my life where I kept meeting very wise people.
You had mentioned that before you weren't really a spiritual person. You were math, science. Had you had any, otherworldly spiritual experiences?
I did, one that I knew that I had was my grandfather. I saw him. I was in a movie in New York City, and I saw this guy from the back. I said, well, that looks like my grandfather to myself. And so I ended up walking around to see, and it was him. He was a unique looking guy. And, I didn't know really what to make of it. I sort of let it go after that. And sometimes I wonder if I see other dead people and I don't even know it, because him I knew. I mean, he looked as solid as, sometimes the things look as solid as a physical person.
Right.
I wonder if I'm seeing other people without realizing it. But that was, I guess something in me knew this, because it's not like I freaked out and thought I was going insane. I just thought, well, I don't know what happened, and kept going.
Yeah, I'm surprised you weren't like really shaken up by that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, did you just...
in one way, it's just kind of naive. So
when the movie was over, you just decided to walk by, and then you just kept on going and left the theater, or what happened?
Yeah. I mean, I saw this person from the back. I mean, my grandfather's a very big guy. He always wore a really nice suit and a cowboy hat and cowboy boots. And in here, the cowboy hat was next to him in the seat. And you couldn't miss him because everyone else in the theater was in jeans and a t-shirt kind of thing, And yeah, I know it seems kind of silly that I didn't do something about it, but
do you think he saw you?
Yeah, well, later, once I became more tuned in, I became aware he came to say goodbye to me. And
Oh
yes,
wow. Oh, that's interesting.
yeah. I mean, he looked at me. I looked at him. That's why I walked around the front. And yeah,
I don't know, man.
you ask those questions. It's like, I don't know why I didn't, you know, someone said to me, you didn't say hello to him? I go, no, I just looked and it was like, I didn't know what to make of it in my mind. And I just sort of moved along.
I think that would have just freaked me out. I probably would have got
Yeah.
chills and wouldn't know what to do. But maybe you didn't know what to do. That's why you just kept on going.
Yeah. Well, I think somewhere inside of me, I knew. And
Mm,
I mean, I always had, I think, a normal feeling when I was young that there's more than, what my parents were doing and
mm,
what was going on, but I didn't know what that was.
mm. Do you feel like you've fully integrated this experience into your life, or you're still doing that?
I don't think that's possible.
Uh,
So,
uh,
well, I guess as much as I could. I mean, I get to make a living and people pay me to do this great healing work, which is cool.
oh wow.
It is, you know, part of it is like socializing with normal people is not something I do that much. So
Hmm.
it becomes, luckily there are, there's like a subculture of people that are into this kind of thing these days.
Hmm.
I think I'm always working to integrate it more. I think there's a lot more possibilities. And I know over the years what I can do for people just seems to increase. Um,
Hmm.
it seems to go like increase and then it'll go like this. The times when it's increasing, sometimes it's actually kind of hard. Like the energy just comes in like when I'm meditating, and sometimes it's so intense that it hurts. Like
Hmm.
if I have any sore in my body, it'll start really hurting
Hmm.
until I get adjusted to that new energy level.
Hmm.
So I had that happen recently where for quite a while it was hard to meditate because the energy would be so strong. It was so uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden I got comfortable with it. And then I can tell when I'm working with people, I'm connecting to a higher place. And it seems to be quicker that they get into that place.
Hmm.
If that, again, I use kind of vague words to describe it because it's not like 1 + 1 = 2. It's more
Hmm.
like this quantum physics equation that leads to this thing. And it's kind of individual for each person, even what healing is, like what they want to experience,
Hmm.
where their unfoldment is. And so it is about unfolding spiritually to me. And usually along with that, there's physical health gets activated or emotional health. It also, there's a lot of negative, we were talking about saints, but there's also the negative
Hmm.
things in the spirit. And those things, when I'm working with people, a lot of them get taken away, which
Mm,
is good.
that's great. Let me catch a question here. The question is, are you scared of death?
I'm not, no, I'm not afraid of being dead. I'm
Mm,
definitely, I don't want to suffer in the process of dying. Like
yeah.
one good thing about my car accident was I didn't know it happened at all. And just I went from, leaving the party to being in the white light. If that happens, I'll be fine with it because that part it was the most loving, most wonderful thing you could
Mm,
imagine. And I get glimpses of that. And I have my daughter. I love her so much. You have kids too. That love you have for them is the closest thing I've experienced. Those times,
mhm,
not the times when your kids are being annoying, the times when it's like you look at them, it's like, you just see them as this perfect being. It's kind of cool.
mm. Let me catch
So
another one.
no, I'm not afraid of being dead. I am possibly afraid of dying if it's, you know, being drawn out or, injured or whatever. So,
That's fair enough. I mean, if someone came at me with a chainsaw, I would still be scared too, right?
yeah, definitely.
Let me catch another question here. Do you think people who die too early, for example, in a war or in a car accident, are they like at a spiritual unrest, or are their souls at unrest?
Sometimes, yes. So sometimes their souls they don't know where to go. Like
Mhm.
at 9/11, where I live uh, in my general area, because there's ferries that go from here right to that area. a lot of people from this area worked there. And yes, definitely.
Mm.
So the way to help those people, again, a lot of times, whether, if anyone has a sense of that, it is, we do use our imagination to activate this kind of healing. And I know I can be a little more specific about it, but you introduce these people to a saint, then they can be basically escorted to a better place.
Mm.
So, but in your imagination, you can imagine, if it's not Jesus, then it's probably a saint that is associated with your religion.
Mm.
So you can just imagine that, and they get helped. A lot of times people come to me and they talk about a relative that passed away, and they are not in as high a place they could.
Mm-hmm.
Today, someone talked to me, and it was like, when I looked, it was like, wow, that person's in a really high place. And it was kind of cool to see. And I kept looking, like I was almost surprised. And I kept going, wow, that person's like really in this high place. And then I was checking, because they didn't live a very spiritual life. They didn't live a bad life. They were a very fun person in this life in a very nice way. But they had another lifetime where they actually were in India, being a very spiritual person. So they came into this life with a kind of very high spiritual place already.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool. You don't have to give any names, obviously, and don't have to reveal too much, but can you give me some examples of some of the most severe cases of, problems, symptoms that you were able to help people with?
Yes. I normally tell the same ones. I'm going to take a moment and talk a little bit and try to think of a different one. But one thing that was a really cool experience, because it was something that happened like in 1 second. This woman, she had arthritis and basically had pain. And it was some years ago. I wonder if she had fibromyalgia or something different than she was. So she was diagnosed with having arthritis, but I don't know if today she would have been. So I could see, she was telling me her story, and I could see there was this American, Native American Indian guide with her who wanted to help her, and she wasn't allowing that to happen. So she was talking, and this happens sometimes. As people talk for 2 seconds, I see all of what's going on, and I try to be polite and listen. So then I said, there's this Native American healing guide with you. And she said, oh, I know, someone told me, but she was afraid of it. And I said, you don't understand, this guide is there to help you. And she opened up, and it was on the phone. I could just feel it shift. And like that, she said, the pain's gone. And that was, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
There's another time someone came to me, they had a miscarriage, a woman, obviously. And her friend sort of forced her to come see. This was in person. And her friend forced her to come see me because she was getting sicker and sicker. The doctors said, forget about ever having a child. We have to work very hard to save you, because she was getting very sick. After 2 sessions, I got an email from her saying, I don't know what you do, but the doctors say I'm getting better. They can't figure it out. About a year later, I heard she was pregnant, and then she ended up having a baby boy. So that was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I should have made some notes before this, because this is the one I want.
You probably weren't expecting this, You don't know what, I'm
sure
you
I
don't know what
because everyone asks.
Oh, it's a common question? Okay. Well, for next time.
A lot of times it's, there's just a lot of cool things. When people line up with their soul or their spirit, good things just start to happen, whether it's health, business things, family stuff. I don't want to talk about things that are current, actually, so I'm not thinking of anything, and only want to share things that when people give me permission to talk about them.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense. Let me catch another question here.
Okay.
Here's the question. I always dream my grandparents' death and my father, who is also dead, almost every day. Do you know if that means something? I can tell you that I love them very much and miss them a lot. And then is it because of my feeling, or is it they're trying to give me some message?
Well, Does that person mind telling me their name? That just their first name who asked you the question? Is that okay? I'm just having a little trouble tuning in. That's why sometimes a little information helps.
You need the first names of the dead people?
No, I think the first name of the person who's asking the question. If
Mariana.
Okay, so in one way, when people pass over into the spirit, they're not the same as they are here. So
Right.
they start to become part of the spirit. And for this, that sounds like a woman's name, it'd be good for her to just soften up in how she's seeing it and allow that energy to expand. If she were to look at it and understand that the way the spirits come in, it would be more like their positive qualities. So she's having some fear about it, so she's not able to really see the whole thing. But and a lot of times the messages are not that specific. So who did she say her both her grandparents and her father?
I think she sees over and over her father and her grandmother, who have both passed.
Okay, yeah. So the idea is to sort of let the energy come in. There is a message in there from her grandmother. It's basically like filled with joy, we could say, as opposed to something specific. And she could open up to that and get more information. So the negative powers, or whatever they're called, like to block our spiritual awareness, because their job is really to maintain the physical level.
Do you think that once?
Yeah, so I'm going to just send the light to her. She looks like, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll ask in a minute.
I'm just going to send the light to that woman because it looks like I would say her liver is a little out of balance. That's affecting, so the fear a lot of times affects the liver. So she could just let some of that go. That's what I would say.
Do you feel that once you let it go, once you've received the message, whatever if that person's bringing you a message, would you stop seeing the person in your dreams?
Possibly. There's nothing written in stone in the spirit. Everything sort of moves. So there's also a lot of times when we see, as I said, when beings go into the spirit, there's an individual part and then there's the whole part. Sometimes we see people in the spirit and it's really just that person because that's how the spirit wants to communicate to us. There's not very much of what we think of as the person physically there. So sometimes it is like when I saw my grandfather, that was my grandfather. Right. But a lot of times it's more like a general message from God that God loves us, and that love is quite remarkable in healing. So.
I'm just wondering, even from me thinking like maybe these people are just coming to say, hey, we're okay, everything's okay.
It is definitely everything's okay in a way, like, and you're loved. That part is a big part of every message. And so for this woman, she can let go of that fear and if she remembers her grandmother, that love that her grandmother has for her, that would be a way to connect to it more instead of trying to look at it with your mind and figure out, is it right or is it wrong? It is the craziest thing we know can be true. And because those things are happening in spirit, it just, in the physical, things are physical, in the spirit, they're not. So we're trying to define it in a way. And in the way I said, like, Jesus was just a light body, there's some wisdom in there. So there would be an image of her grandmother, but there's also the light that's around her. So her grandmother's trying to help her heal from something also. So that is something that's definitely real.
That's interesting. She responded, thank you very much for the light. I understand your message.
Great.
Okay. Do you?
Yeah, even though I talk vaguely, people normally do. It's cool.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Christianity, for what I know, does not, the reincarnation is not part of Christianity. You just go and I guess you're with Jesus for infinity or whatever. Do you believe in reincarnation, or are you more to Christian beliefs that that's it?
I believe in reincarnation, and as I said, Jesus is the greatest reincarnation story of all time. So
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know why Christian people don't believe in that. So
yeah.
there are a lot of things in the Bible that
Mhm.
indicate that talk about something that could be considered reincarnation, as much as how other people interpret it.
Oh yeah, that's a great interpretation. That'd be something good to Google actually. Is just sit down and I might do that myself one day. Is Google, are there any, interpretations of reincarnation in the Bible? And someone will
Yeah,
probably, post some scripture somewhere. I'm sure
that's right.
somebody has done that. I could be wrong, but
I
I
would think
feel
probably
99.
books written about it. Right.
Right. Yeah. All right. So if someone wants to get any healing with you or just some counseling with you, what is the best way to contact you?
Yeah. My website is lawrencebrock.com.
Mhm.
My YouTube channel is Dr. Lawrence Brock.
Mhm.
And my phone number is 732-567-6388. Any of those ways, you can go on my website, actually make an appointment on there.
Mhm.
Uh, I have other appointments. If any of those don't work, just get in touch with me.
Mhm.
So there's an email on my website and the phone number and everything.
Okay, great. Let me check another one. I don't know if you know that there is a war going on right now in Armenia between the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis.
I didn't know that.
That's very far Eastern Europe. There are a lot of people dying right now, young guys, 18 to 20 years old. Would you have any advice
Yeah,
to parents of children dying in war? I call them children. I mean, they're not, but to me, that young
yeah.
is.
I do too. Yeah.
Mhm.
That is, I mean, having your child die is probably one of the worst experiences on the physical level.
Mhm.
Well, I can send the light there. I can tell you, so one of the cool experiences I have actually, and I don't think I ever talked about that. I was taking this dreams class,
Mhm.
and you know, so doing journaling and trying to be more conscious in my dreams. And I had this dream that I was up on this, I don't know, like a some sort of thing up here, and there was a war going on here, and I knew it was in the Israelites and Palestinians
Mhm.
fighting, and there was a lot of warring going on there. And in the dream, I had the wherewithal to call on the light, and then the fighting stopped. The next day, I woke up. There was in the newspaper, like somehow out of nowhere, they came to a peace treaty, at
Mhm.
least for that time right then. That was very cool.
Yeah.
I think praying, if you can do it generically, is important.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't, there's the spiritual part where you can pray and stuff, but, the part of my mother died when I was like in my mid 30s, and still, so that was like 30 years ago. Still, there are times I just miss her and feel really sad about it. So that personal part is, there is grieving, there's mourning. Those are things that are valid. I think journal writing is a really great tool for anybody anywhere, but for processing emotions, it's great. Talk to people about it, get support. If you need help, it's important to reach out to people. That's, if you're
Mhm.
talking about the spiritual part, it's a tough thing, but I think praying and sending the light there, there's a way to make a donation to a church, sort of as a tithe ahead kind of thing.
Mhm.
Tithing you're supposed to do after you get something. This
Mhm.
is more like tithe on you assuming it happening, and just make a small donation to a church, something that can help uh, people. And it'd be like, for your child, that they be safe. And, if they pass away, if they get killed there, to, that they be taken to the highest place possible, that they be supported spiritually.
Mhm.
That would be something to do.
Mhm. It's interesting. Do you have any projects that you're working on right now that you'd like people to know about?
Um, that's a good question. I'm always in the process of editing videos that I make.
Mhm.
But no, I'm doing my work. I have been thinking about trying to do something live online, but I haven't started that yet. I love my work. I love helping people. It is so rewarding. Especially like if a grieving mother is just, getting some hope when I can connect to their child and give them messages. That's really cool. Um, Now, I mostly just really love doing my work and stuff. Projects are. I have a daughter. I do stuff with her. I help the local school systems and things like that.
Oh, that's great. I got a comment that says, "Thank you for your positive and kind aura."
Oh, you're welcome. It's nice to be able to share that with people who are open-minded. It's a great thing.
Do you have any advice for people right now who are suffering with the coronavirus? Not, and I don't mean suffering as being positive, but I mean just suffering from being indoors, anxiety, all the stress.
Yes, I give this, don't let reality get in your way. That's all I could say. And that's kind of a funny way of, whatever your things you enjoy or your passions, find some way to express that. And, I work from home. And in the beginning of being quarantined, it seemed silly to me because my life wasn't that different, but it was getting to me. The energy is kind of weird. The fear, in the US, the political climate, it's hard to trust any information we're getting at all about anything. But everyone has this wonderful thing in them that knows of God's love and knows their love and that part. And the thing that in you is that you love to do try to do that regardless. And it takes, I actually have tools on my YouTube channel that can be very helpful. There's one called Freedom Writing that is a great, great tool I talk about getting the cobwebs out of your head, basically. Whenever I'm in a funk, if I do that, almost always, I say almost, but every time I remember, within an hour or two, all of a sudden, I just feel like all that junk in my head is out, all that emotional junk. So that's a really good thing.
Is that kind of teaching you how to do journal writing?
It's more, some people, it's just like flow of consciousness writing, but part of it is that's a little different than what people do is you burn the paper when it's over, when you're done, and it just sort of seems to just get everything. There's some details there. You don't have to worry about writing neatly. It is just, oh, there's a bird, there's a spider, it's cold. It's, oh, I remember when I was a kid. And you don't even have to write out the full sentence. So it's just keep writing whatever pops into your head.
That's interesting. I wonder if is it just memories popping into your head, or is it more like visions?
It could be, sometimes it's emotions like, oh, that person, some swear word might come to your head. Sometimes I hear a truck outside. So you really just go with whatever comes up. So sometimes there are things, oh yeah, I remember this from my childhood, or you get a spiritual awareness about something.
That's interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So before we wrap it up here, is there one message that you would like to give everybody before we go?
Well, I'd like to say I love you, and within that, there is just that God loves you. And there's something in everyone that is this really cool thing. It can be, I get to do this, it's very obviously spiritual, but construction workers, athletes, writers, anything, when you get connected to that really cool thing in you, it could be cooking. I love to cook, a couple of years ago, this woman came to me and said, I know I'm very spiritual, but I don't know what to do. She was a mother, and I go, what are you talking about? Like, that's the most spiritual thing in the world, and she goes, oh, and you could see her face just lit up, like she realized she was doing this valuable thing. So usually people are doing some of that really cool thing, and they just have to acknowledge it and let it come together.
Oh, that's a great point. That's awesome. Well, Dr. Brock, thank you so much for giving me your time this evening. I really appreciate it. I wish you massive success in your life, in your business, helping people. I'm sure you're already helping people. I wish you to help even more people, and I appreciate you. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.